So we are now welcoming Yaniv Tal, and we will be talking about building Web3's composable knowledge layer. So everyone, pay attention to this. This is a very interesting talk.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. Great to be here today. So yeah, I'm Yaniv. I founded the Graph back in 2017, and I've been working on helping to build this Web3 thing ever since. Started working on Geo about 4 years ago. It's a layer on top of the Graph. And you know, it's been a bit of a journey. We've been working on this Web3 thing as an industry for a while. I'm still somewhat looking for it. Right? People might have different definitions of what Web3 is. Right? For me, it's an open, verifiable, composable web, right? Like a new web. It's more than just money. It's more than just DeFi. It's an open, composable, verifiable web. And we're seeing the beginnings of things, right, with social and different things. But what's this thing really going to look like? And I think it helps to look at concrete examples. So if we just look at something simple like events, right? We're at an event today at ETH Prague. There's things throughout the week. You're probably checking out what side events and things to go to. Maybe you're using something like Luma, right? Luma is a Web2 app, right? It's controlled by a company. They do make the information available through an API, but it's a limited way of accessing and contributing to knowledge and information. And Luma's not the only app, right? There's a bunch of different apps. You can have things on Meetup, Eventbrite, maybe different companies have their own websites where they kind of publish their events. And so it's very scattered, right? And this is what we call silos across different applications. And you can imagine, if you had a question like, what are all of the Ethereum events in Europe next week? You should be able to ask that and get a definitive answer, right? And when we have Web3, when this thing really exists, all of that information will be open and it'll be verifiable, right? Which means that there's cryptographic signatures, and you can really know that you're getting the correct answer to any question that you want to ask. So if you think about what would it take to be able to answer a question like this definitively if we had all this information on Web3. So last year I published a post called Knowledge Graphs are Web3. And the claim that I make here is that knowledge is actually the missing piece and the primitive that we need to make this Web3 vision a reality. And so, with Ethereum, we talk a lot about Web3. There's DeFi really seems to be, the main use case that's really taken off so far on the chain. But it took standardization, right? ERC20 defining a composable standard for value that really made this DeFi thing explode. Right now, you could have different smart contracts and protocols with interoperable value, and that's what enabled, DeFi. And similarly, last year we released a new standard for knowledge called GRC20. And in the same way, you need standardization to really enable composability. And I'm going to talk through what some of the pieces are, what it means to have a standard for knowledge, so we can truly build open, composable, verifiable applications. But what is knowledge? So you can think of data as being just the raw bits and information, for example, on a blockchain or anywhere. Right? It's just kind of the raw bits. And then information is when you structure that information, right? That data into a structure. So think of tables. Right? You all use tables, you have a schema, and it's this fixed set of here are the fields, and that is your information. Now, knowledge is much more free form, and you can think about how you even think about things in your own mind, right? When you're learning and you're creating knowledge, you're building connections between things, right? You're understanding the relationships. Oh, this is kind of like that other thing that I saw, right? Or this contradicts that, or these things are related. So it's that free form interconnection between different things that helps you build up a layer of understanding. And you can't have these rigid structures to enable knowledge. So that's a key difference. You can think of knowledge as being in concrete terms, like linked and labeled information, but that is unstructured and that can really evolve. And that allows us to better map the world around us, and that's really what we need as we build this interconnected Web3 thing. Knowledge graphs and these kind of ideas have been around actually for a while, and the original architects of the web, we've got Tim Berners-Lee at the conference here, right? These guys have been working on something called the semantic web, which was this vision of an open, interoperable web, and RDF triples, right, and triple stores are really kind of the foundation for this. RDF, it's a W3 standard. It uses these triples that are subject, predicate, object, but it is limited, right? They don't have support for properties on the edges, which turns out to be really important. And if you actually look at the RDF standard, it uses XML. It's pretty complex to use. Developers have not really picked it up. It has issues where like the IDs are these URIs, which a lot of times, most of the time, just points to decentralized servers. So you can't really use this like in a Web3 context. Anyways, we would need to migrate all of the existing RDF data that's out there. But it kind of gave us like a point in the right direction. More recently, we've seen an emergence and growth in these things called property graphs. And that's gotten popularized with graph databases like Neo4j. And especially recently with AI, these things have really taken off because it turns out that graph databases and things like Neo4j work really well with GraphRag and with like these new AI LLM tools. And the property graph model uses these entities and relations as the base model. And you can actually have properties on the relations, which I'll show in just a bit, which is really a much more powerful way to model knowledge. And we can make this Web3 native. So it starts with the entities, and an entity can be any person, place, thing, right? You can think of it as an entity. These entities have globally unique IDs. And that's something that's really important when you think about composability. Right? So, right now we're in Prague. Prague is a city. And if you were building an application that wanted to reference the city of Prague, what ID would you use? Right? There really is not like a clear place for you to go to be like, oh, that's the ID for Prague, right? And so if every system uses a different ID, you have a million applications with a million different IDs. That's part of this issue of composability. So you actually need standardization, and that's part of what the standard can give us. Then you need relations, right? And relations between things. And with gRC20, we have these property graph style relations. So for example, we have Byron works at Geo, right? So works at is the relation type, and we can have properties on that relation. So for example, when did Byron start working on Geo? At Geo. So if you think about something like this, right, it's not really a property of Byron, and it's not really a property of Geo, the company, right? It's a property of the relation. And so very few information systems that we use today, if you're building an application in like a relational database, right, you don't really have this kind of thing, right? You have tables with foreign keys, but having relations be their own things that you can add properties to is actually a really powerful way that allows us to accurately model the world the way it exists. And so if you have these entities and you have relations between those entities, right, that forms a graph. And that's really what we're talking about here with knowledge, right, is building like a global interconnected graph of all of the world's public knowledge and information and seeing how are things related. And critically, this stuff happens across domains. Right, so we're building individual applications, and when you're doing that, you're thinking about your users, you're thinking about specific use cases, but the information that lives inside your app, it's actually connected to all the other information, right? Like Prague doesn't just live in your app, right? Or this event doesn't just live in one app. So that's entities and relations, and then on top of that, we can start to add some structure. And for that, we define these things called types. So an entity can have many types, right? This is different than many type systems where you'd have a single type. And the types give structure. And the way we do it, the structure is optional. Right? So in a relational database, if you try to feed in some row and it doesn't exactly match the fixed structure, your database breaks. Right? It's like, nope, I can't take this. But when we're talking about composable knowledge, what we want to do is we really want to enable interoperability. And if you have lots of different applications that are using shared knowledge and information, they can't just break. It needs to be able to accommodate lots of different types of data. So it is a flexible type system, but this still allows you to start to standardize on common fields and things. And this is what helps create structure and standardization. The types are composed of properties, and we have different native types for the properties. Can be text, numbers, date and times. And these things, what we do here is the properties actually have also globally unique IDs. So we represent the types and the properties as just normal entities, right? So it's like the schema is just data. And because these things have globally unique IDs, you can change the names and things over time. So you've probably done this in an application where you decide, oh, we gave this thing the wrong name, and then you try to change it, and then maybe you have to do a giant migration, or maybe things break because the names no longer match. That's true within a single application, but if you're talking about having thousands of interoperable applications, that stuff becomes intractable, right? And what you need is the ability to let people evolve their schemas, right? To add properties, to change the name of properties, this types of things, while still being able to interpret all of the data that was already created and generated and out there, right? And so this is the sort of stuff that you have to get these primitives right to actually have this composability across applications over time. So all of this knowledge, we organize into spaces. And you can have public spaces or personal spaces. Public spaces you can have for any type of community. So think of industries, regions, academic fields, interest groups, right? All of these things can be organized into spaces. Each space has its own knowledge graph and has its own either governance system or access control rules for how to update the knowledge for that space. So the process of publishing knowledge is, right, you have a user, and a user can use any number of applications, and this is part of that composability. It's not going to be one app, it's going to be lots of different apps. Each of these apps can publish their knowledge in this GRC20 format, and the way that works is you encode it. We use protobufs as the encoding standard. It's a really efficient way of serializing and encoding data. And you can take any amount of these entities and relations, ops, so these are changes to those things, and batch them into a single payload that you upload to IPFS or to Arweave, and then you post that on chain, right? So with a single on-chain transaction, you could update 1,000 entities, 1,000 relations. And by publishing it on chain, you get global consistency, right, over the state of the knowledge graph at every point in time. So this is really powerful, right? You now have a way to, regardless of what you're talking about in your application, whatever the ontology or the schemas or types are, you can update arbitrary amounts of data that touches any entity, any relation, and you can have global consensus over knowledge in any type of space. Again, we have the personal spaces and public spaces. So if it's a personal space, you can publish to that right away. Basically, a personal space, think of it as being controlled by an individual or an entity. Maybe you have a company website that's controlled by the company. Or as an individual, you can publish to that right away. And then the public spaces, they can aggregate data from these personal spaces, or you can publish directly to public spaces. But for that, you have a governance process. And so these spaces you arrange into a subspace hierarchy. And this becomes really interesting when you think about public knowledge and information of how different communities interact with each other and how to grow the amount of consensus, right? Maybe, within a company, we have a certain view on knowledge and information, and that's within our company. But what about at an industry level, right? What about at a region? I think one of the issues we have in the world today is that, anyone can say anything on the internet. We're all talking past each other, and it makes it really difficult to have quality discussions, right? Because if we can't even agree on basic facts, how are we supposed to actually understand what's going on in the world and have quality discussions? So this ability to get to shared views, shared facts, I think is really important at a societal level. I actually think this is what we need to have a healthy society. And it also is a thing that enables this Web3 thing. And so, you want to find this balance between freedom, where anyone can publish anything, anyone can create their own views, and curation. Because ultimately, I think we want to help people better understand the world. And for that, the reality is that, not all opinions are created equal, right? Some people know things, on particular topics more than others. And if we're going to have sane systems for organizing knowledge and information, we need to elevate people who understand certain things better. And so, I think that is going to be an interesting journey as we build out reputation systems and ways of better curating knowledge and information so the best information can rise to the top. That is, part of this journey as well. So if we look at, the difference between Web 2 and Web 3, in Web 2, the data is controlled by the application, right? And the application is storing that data. They're controlling the structure of the information for that application. And the web platform is just this very thin layer, right? In Web 3, that gets reversed, right? The platform is actually where the data lives, right? It's not controlled by the application, and that's what enables the freedom and the interoperability. For that, though, you need the right kind of primitives to structure and organize that knowledge and information that can be used across all the different applications. We've gone deep on a bunch of different use cases. We're going to be sharing out today. We organized a bunch of the knowledge around ETH Prague, and this week here in Prague, in this sort of knowledge graph where we have speakers and the different side events and the talks and all this kind of stuff organized in a knowledge graph. It's a cool kind of example. But I want to talk a little bit about just some lessons through this process of years going deep into the stuff as we prepare to start opening more of this up. So first lesson is, if you're building something like this, whether it's infrastructure or something, that's like a foundational piece for Web3, pick a few use cases and go deep, because each one is different. We actually spent months going deep on just politics, right? Or months going deep on just news or philosophy. We picked a problem, which for us was homelessness in San Francisco. And we actually dove really deep into that problem. How would we use Web3 to solve a problem like this? And with each of these things, it gave us, through this breadth, an understanding of what's required of these tools, across these different domains. Lesson 2 is that you don't need more than 10 users to iterate with. So we've had a group of 10 users that we've spent, the last 2 years, them basically full-time organizing knowledge, building out different use cases, and that's actually preferable if you have a smaller group of people and you're really iterating, because it allows you to go really deep also with those people, and you can get things to a really polished state like that. And lesson 3 is that foundational primitives need to be stable, right? That's the number one job of a primitive, is to be a stable foundation that's not changing. If you think about HTTP, it does not change every year, right? There's been one update to the spec in the last 30 years. So that's what we're trying to achieve here with GRC20, right? Is to have a stable foundation for interoperable knowledge, where this knowledge that's being produced today will be able to be used in like 100 years, right? And still, as people are building apps, the apps will continue to run. They're not going to break. And that's going to enable, so many different apps to get traction and get usage because people don't have to be worried that if I start using this app, it's going to break, right? I think that's going to be a really big advantage that Web3 has. Just today, we updated our spec for GRC20. I'm going to be kind of sharing a link. We're in the finalization stage, so if anybody wants to jump in and provide feedback, we're going to be finalizing the spec very, very soon. So now is the time. We've already done one online hackathon, and we're going to be doing more for people who want to get their hands dirty and start playing around organizing knowledge using GRC20. We've been iterating on the governance process for these public spaces. We've been working with Aragon, who's been really great to work with on kind of the governance tools for these public spaces to help communities get to consensus on public knowledge. And we've been working on this application, GeoGenesis, which is the first UI that uses GRC20. And you can think of this as like a Web3 Notion. Right? So Notion, you define your tables and your structures for things, and that's like within your one app. Imagine if we could connect all of the notions together, right, into this global graph of public knowledge and information, but having governance on top of that also. So you have like a Git history for all knowledge. You can see how did this thing change, like who approved this, how did we get into this state, right? It's something that anybody can edit. This was actually a property they wanted to have in the web, and they didn't get it there. And, with most applications, you don't have this. But, if you have public knowledge and information that people are using, like, if you see something that's wrong, do you have a way that you can update that thing? You don't. And that's part of, the issue with these kind of closed platforms. So, imagine an open web where everything is kind of editable, but through a governance process, and you can see exactly how it changed. So this is, we've had to invent a bunch of new UI affordances here, both on the governance side as well as, creating this global interconnected graph. You can actually view this today. You can go to geobrowser.io to check this out. We have a bunch more content that we're going to be publishing here, and we're going to start opening it up more soon. We have a new set of tools for developers that are going to be coming out really soon that's going to enable people to build custom apps on top of GRC20. So I'm really excited about that. We've been working on this for a while. In the meantime, you can play around with, if you go to the Graph Protocol GitHub, this GRC20 TS library for just generating entities and relations and types and properties. So this makes it really easy to interact with GRC20 standard. And there's a link to the spec in this repo. So if you want to check out the spec, this is the best place to go to find that. And you can scan this QR code to sign up for early access to GeoGenesis. So this is invite only. We're going to start opening this up more very soon. So sign up for early access here. And it's been a while that we've been working on this Web3 thing, right? For me, almost 8 years. And the revolution is coming, right? Like Web3 really is going to change everything. We're going to rebuild everything on top of this new foundation. It's going to be open, it's going to be decentralized, and it's going to change how we coordinate, how we organize and achieve things. Hopefully you guys will be the ones building a lot of these apps that change how people do things on Web3. So the revolution is coming, and we can build this thing, if we use the right primitives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone in the audience have any questions for the moment? I guess not.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you again.